Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our live session today. My name is Larissa. I'm an event planner at Reactor, joining you from São Paulo in Brazil. Before we start, I have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Remember, the session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand here on the Reactor YouTube channel within 48 hours. Keep an eye on the chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters and moderators to answer. I'll now turn it over to our speakers for today. Thank you, and let's welcome Frank and Kevin.
Hey Kevin, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Frank. And of course, welcome everybody to today's session in the series about Fabric Data Engineer certification.
Exactly.
And this is a DP-700 accelerated session. So,
Kevin?
from MVP, Microsoft Certified Trainer, Fabric Super User, etc. And you can find me online in a few different places.
Yeah.
Over to you, Frank.
Hi, my name is Frank Geisler. I'm also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, or to be more precise, a Microsoft Fabric and Real-Time Intelligence MVP. You can find me also on X or on LinkedIn or on GitHub. And yeah, and if you have any other questions afterwards, please just connect and then we can answer them. Okay, Kevin. So I would say just let's meet our moderators. So if you have any questions, please feel free to just put them in the chat. There are Philippa and Zahir, and they are here to help you. So if there are any questions to anything we say, please ask them, and I'm very sure that they will do a tremendous job. Okay, so Kevin, let's start.
Indeed. Hang on, we got a few more slides to go through yet. So you got
Yes. So there are different things happening in January and February. So there is, you can see all the dates. I won't read them to you, right? And if you want to know about the Fabric certifications, you can just scan the QR code. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about this, Kevin?
Oh, okay. Yeah, there is a Power BI Data Viz World Championship taking place at the moment. Those of you who are active online have probably seen this. It's been quite well broadcasted. So yeah, if you're interested in knowing what's going on there, scan the QR code. And I'm kind of guessing, Frank, you want to talk about the next slide a little bit, because I noticed you kind of sneaked it in.
How did this get in here, Kevin? I have no idea. So yeah, well, Kevin and me, we are doing a podcast on Microsoft Fabric certification. At the moment, we are having a series on DP-700 questions. And what we're doing here is we just get some of the assessment questions you will find at the internet on the Microsoft DP-700 slide. And in each episode, we will discuss about one of these questions. And if you're interested in, then I will just welcome you to scan the QR code and just subscribe to our YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. So, remember to mention about the workshops as well, Frank?
Yeah. So there are also free instructor-led hands-on workshops. So this is what we do here now is just like a presentation. So we will talk about stuff, right? But if you would like to really get your hands on the different aspects of Fabric, then you are very welcome to join either Fabric Analyst in a day. This is about Fabric in general, so dealing with topics like lakehouses and warehouses, stuff like this, and how to get data in. And the other one, and this is one of my very favorites, is real-time intelligence in a day. I did one 2 weeks ago, which was a really huge success here in Germany. And real-time intelligence is about data streaming capabilities, which you could use in Microsoft Fabric. Okay, so let's move on.
You got to.
Okay, so what you can see here on the slides is you can have two different kinds of certifications. So one of the certifications is the DP-600, which is Microsoft Fabric Analytics Engineer. And the other one, and this is the one we are talking about today, is DP-700, which is about Fabric Data Engineer. So maybe just for you to get a little bit of what certification is for whom. So the Fabric Analytics Engineer certification is more if you are working with the data, so doing, for example, Power BI reports, doing some analytics on top of the data. The Fabric Data Engineer is more about if you build data estates within Fabric. So if you build, for example, pipelines, if you build real-time intelligence solutions, if you build lakehouses. So this is more the certification for you. But I think if you're really into Fabric, you should get both of them, right, Kevin?
Yeah, this is very true. Well, it does depend on your focus area as well, by the way, folks. We're not saying straight away go for both at the same time or go for one straight after the other. Of course, it does depend a little bit on your focus area. DP-600 is more aimed towards those from a Power BI background, to be completely honest. So if you're used to doing in-depth stuff with semantic models, etc., like Frank mentioned, in the DP-700, yeah, you can kind of think of it as the Fabric equivalent of the previous Azure Data Engineer certification.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, if you want that nice big breadth of Fabric, then yeah, look preferably to do the two.
Yeah. Oh, and this is very interesting as well. So there will be the next Fabric conference, the FabCon, and this time it will be from March 16 to 20th in Atlanta. There are really many different sessions, and there are also workshops, and I will be in Atlanta as well, and I will do a workshop on real-time intelligence, right? So if you're in Atlanta, please come by and say hi.
Well, let's manage some expectations now from everybody, Frank, about what we will cover today.
Yes, so the thing is, DP-700 is also a very certification exam which spans different topics. So there will be no way that we could cover everything which is in DP-700 within this hour. I think even the certification test is longer than 1 hour, right, Kevin? And so, yeah, but what we will do is we will talk about some different topics here. So down at the slides, there are different QR codes you can scan. So one is for the DP-700 Prepare session series. The other one is for DP-700 Prepare resources. And there is one for the F-files as well. Awesome.
Yeah. So like the title of the session, it says today, folks, and like Frank was saying, this is an accelerated session, the day two. Basically give you all of the essential resources you need to carry on with your journey towards actually learning more about the exam and, of course, getting the certification.
Exactly.
So this is essentially what we will cover in a reasonably short time frame today. So we will cover implementing and managing analytics solutions, followed by ingesting and transforming data, and then last but by no means least, because this is quite an important topic, monitoring and optimizing solutions. And of course, as a lot of you online have probably already seen in the chat, this is live and interactive. Say hi and ask away all of your relevant questions.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Okay, well, this is more or less content from the website from DP-700. So the level is intermediate. So if you are not so familiar with Microsoft data topics, maybe you would like to go for the DP-900 or something like this to just know about data and know about the different kinds of data. So this is intermediate, and as we already said, the role it's for the role of data engineers. So if your role in your company is to get data into Fabric, to build data estates, to build probably real-time intelligence solutions, then this is a certification for you. Okay, so I think let's go to the next slide.
Sure. Just one more thing to add as well is, by the way, I tend to call this a 2-star certification because, as you can see, it is predominantly is an associate certification. So just want to know a little bit of knowledge there.
Yeah. So there is also a DP-700 skills in-depth study guide. So what you can see here is a little bit of a breakdown of the different kind of topics that might, or not that might, that will be in the DP-700. And you can also see the percentage of how many of the questions will be in the different topics. And what you can see here is there is a rather even split between the different topics. So there is like 1/3 of the questions is about implementing and managing an analytic solution. So what you have to do here is something like configuring Microsoft Workspace settings, implement lifecycle management in Fabric, one of your very special topics, right, Kevin? And then configuring security and governance, and for sure how to orchestrate stuff. So if you have, for example, different data flow Gen 2 data flows Gen 2, how you could orchestrate them through a Fabric pipeline. Then another third of the questions will be about ingesting and transforming data, because this is one of the main topics or of the main work items that data engineers do. They are getting data from wherever and putting it into Fabric. So what's here important is how to design and implement loading patterns. So, for example, there could be something like differential loading or something like this. Then ingest and transform batch data, and for sure also ingest and transform streaming data, because these are the two kinds of how to get data into Fabric. Then the last part and the last third of this certification is about monitoring, and it's about especially about how to monitor Fabric items, how to identify and resolve errors, and how to optimize performance, which are also very important things, because after you build all of this, you have to monitor it to ensure that it will work flawlessly, right? Okay.
So can I just add a little bit to this as well, Frank? So
Sure.
obviously you got the study guide here, and obviously the link will be shared in the chat. One thing I do want people to take a little bit of notice for, and of course on this screen is a little bit small in depth, there's a little button that's covered in purple that says Ask Learn. So what you can do now is actually ask questions about the exam, etc., in natural language when you go to the study guide. So a little bit of AI knowledge for some of you there.
Yeah, that's true. So let's move to the next slide. Kevin?
And I appear to have disappeared and come back magically again,
Yeah.
which is the implement and manage analytics solutions in Fabric.
Yes.
So as you can see, we have this very nice diagram here of all the different ways that the movement of data going through into Fabric through data ingestion. So you get your various sources here, for example. You can ingest data through Data Factory or for data engineering methods, in other words, through notebooks, through to data warehouses, etc., doing things with real-time intelligence, etc. As you can see at the bottom, you can do things with shortcuts as well. You have OneLake, of course, which is your central storage for most of the data that gets ingested.
And maybe some very interesting or some very important things here on this. You see two different kinds of how to get data in. So one is shortcuts. If you use shortcuts, then the data will not physically be in the OneLake. It will only be a shortcut. You can think about like a link or like a pointer, which will point to data which is somewhere else, and somewhere else could even be not in the Microsoft ecospace, could also be, for example, at Amazon or at Google. And the other thing, what you could do is you could do mirroring. And if you do mirroring, then you actually mirror the data from wherever it is into Fabric. That means that the data afterwards will be physically within Fabric. And what's here interesting as well is that you can see there are all these different kind of compute, all of this different kind of serverless compute, like data science, like Power BI, like real-time intelligence. And all of this will just work with the OneLake as a data foundation. So you can think of the OneLake, or the OneLake can service two purposes. One of the purposes is that it is managed Azure Data Lake Gen 2. And the other is that it is also a virtualization layer. So you can virtualize your data estate by using, for example, these shortcuts. And all of the data, it doesn't matter if it is through shortcuts or through mirroring, can be accessed through the Microsoft Fabric workloads, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, anything else you want to mention about this slide before I carry on, Frank, into the next one?
No, just please go to the next slide.
Right, so let's talk about data storage in Fabric now. So,
yeah,
as you can quite clearly see by the first sentence, it is built on top of Azure Data Lake Storage. So basically, you can think of it as a layer of abstraction on top of Azure Data Lake Storage accounts. So all the Fabric data items, you can see they store the data mostly automatically in a Delta Lake format or Delta Parquet format, depending on your background. But you can, of course, ingest data into Fabric on different file types as well. I want to make sure everybody is aware of that, and then convert it to the Delta Lake format, which allows you to query it in a table manner. So it is compatible with existing Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 applications like Azure Databricks, Synapse Serverless SQL Pools, etc., etc. So basically, it is not a proprietary format. The Delta Parquet format that it saves in, it can be read by other engines that can read the Delta Lake formats as well.
Yeah.
So every workspace, as you can see, appears as a container within that storage account. And there is now even more in depth, actually, because there were some interesting updates came up relating to this last year, the Azure Databricks Unity Catalog integration. So something you may want to keep your eye on as well. So if you are working with the Azure Databricks Unity Catalog, and there has been some updates, like I mentioned, relating to this, you can actually mirror over a lot of the metadata related content now into Fabric. So definitely something to look at, especially if you're working with Unity Catalog in Databricks.
Exactly. Maybe I would like to add two more things. One thing is, as Kevin already said, that you can put in all kinds of data. So what you could do as well is you can just put in videos, you can put in pictures, right? And if you have Python notebooks or something who can analyze this, like, for example, to spot something's going on a video or something like this, you can do this. And the other thing is, the One Lake is also like an open data lake. So everything which can access an Azure Data Lake Gen 2 can also work with the One Lake.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about integration and orchestration now, Frank. I'll let you lead on this one.
Okay, yeah. So there are different kinds. So the main workload where you can do integration with is the Data Factory. And the Data Factory has different workloads, like, for example, Data Flows Gen 2. Data Flows Gen 2 is pretty neat because Data Flows Gen 2 is more or less like Power Query in the browser, right? So the whole knowledge you have from Power Query within Power BI, you could use with the Data Flows Gen 2. It's even so the language behind this is the same. It's M, right? And what you could even do is you can just copy over if you already have a complicated data transformation thingy in Power BI. You can just copy over. Then maybe you have to tweak a little bit, and then you can run it there. And the most, at least to me, maybe you are have a different opinion, but the most different thing to Power Query within Power BI is that with the Data Flows Gen 2, what you could do here as well is you can decide in which data sink you will write your data. Because within Power BI, it's very clear the data sink will be the semantic model, right? But with Data Flows Gen 2 could be, for example, Lakehouse, could be a warehouse within Fabric, and you can just put your data there. And there is another thing which is called pipelines. Pipelines is more like an orchestration step. So the thing is, what you could do with a pipeline is if you have different Data Flows Gen 2, or if you have different notebooks, I will come to this a little bit later, then you can just orchestrate them and can say, okay, first I want to execute this pipeline, then I want you to execute that pipeline, then I want to execute that pipeline. And if something gets wrong, Kevin will get an email to fix everything, right? And this is what you could do with the pipelines. So if you are coming more from a Databricks side of things, then might be you will ask, okay, do I have to use this Data Flows Gen 2? No, you don't, because what you could do as well is there are notebooks within Fabric, and what you could do within notebooks is you can write Python code, and you can use these notebooks to just integrate the data into Fabric as well, and you can use these notebooks within pipelines as well. And the last thing is real-time intelligence, but I think, Kevin, to real-time intelligence, we have a special slide for this as well, right? But you wanted to add something.
I did indeed. So something just quickly to add, especially relating to pipelines, when you go to work with data pipelines and Fabric, by the way, if you've worked with Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipelines before, the canvas is very similar. And actually, just as I was explaining this, I had a question come in about what exactly is a pipeline.
Yes.
And in this context, a pipeline is actually, when you work in Fabric, known as a data pipeline. And like I said, when you work with data pipeline, it's the same canvas, well, similar canvas as what you may have worked with an Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipelines in the past. And when you work with a data pipeline, it's basically a logical flow of activities when you're moving data, when you're ingesting data from multiple sources into, for example, a Fabric data lakehouse. There is obviously a lot more to data pipelines, but that's the shortest explanation I think I can provide you at this moment in time. So
Kevin,
yeah, it is. Yeah.
I have another question for you. The question is, what is the best practice to handle schedule for ETL from source to Bronze tier, Bronze to Silver?
Missed the question, but we go to that one. So what's the best practice to handle schedule from ETL from source to Bronze tier? To handle the schedule itself is a bit of an interesting question. If you know when regular data is going to come in, obviously you can just orchestrate a schedule of time directly within, for example, the data pipeline. So create a schedule in data pipeline. If it's got activities to run notebooks or data flows, etc., you can do it directly from there. And then you can, on a regular basis, ingest data directly straight to either your Bronze layer or any other layer before the Bronze that you happen to have. Or you can actually set up an event now so that when new...
And I think we lost Kevin a little bit again. So maybe one more thing to this question, to exactly this question. So the thing is that, as you know, we are consultants as well. So the thing is, the consultant answer to this, what we only can give is it depends, because it very much also depends on your current data estate. Because usually what you don't do is you don't just have a greenfield approach and just create Fabric, because usually what you have is you have already some data estates in place. And for example, if you already have maybe a full-fledged data warehouse, it doesn't make any sense to just get the data from the data warehouse, put it into a Bronze layer, and then transform it to the Silver layer, because the data in your data warehouse is already cleansed and is already enriched and stuff like this. So in this case, maybe it would, for this special data warehouse, it would be interesting to just have as a shortcut, right, to the data warehouse, and have this data warehouse in your Silver layer. So there are so many different kinds of things. So, but what I think, what's the main important thing on this question is, first of all, before you just build something in Fabric, you have to analyze the current data estate to just see, okay, what's already there, what do we already have, maybe which processes we already have, and then think about how you can leverage Fabric to extend this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have another question as well, which we have to make sure we cover. If we already have a data platform and we want to migrate to Fabric, is it best practice to keep Azure SQL databases and the Azure Data Lake storage account and use pointers and mirroring, or should the data be migrated into Fabric?
This also is a very depends on question, right? This also depends on very many parameters. But the thing is, what you could, for example, do, and this, I think this would be a nice thing to do, is if you have your source system somewhere out there already, it would be a nice thing, for example, to just have these source systems as shortcuts, and use these shortcuts then as a Bronze layer, and from there transform the data into Fabric, into the Silver layer. But on the other hand, as said, it always depends. maybe if the shortcut is too slow because of the data source you have, maybe then it's better to just copy the data over to a Bronx layer and then work from there. And we have another question, Kevin, and this question I could ask you, right, is I am confused, so I am confused between OneLake, Data Lake, Lakehouse. Please explain. It's slightly confusing because of all the similar names.
Yeah, because they all use I can see why they got different lakes. So here you go, everybody. Very short, brief answer to that question. OneLake is the main storage layer in Fabric. As I mentioned earlier, it is a layer of abstraction over multiple Azure Data Lake storage accounts. That is where you work with all your files in Fabric, and that includes the Delta tables.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, so you can think of OneLake as a managed data lake, right? So data lake is more a concept, and OneLake is a product that Microsoft is offering, which is justifying this concept. And a lakehouse, on the other thing, is something that sits on the data lake. And what you can do is, so the name lakehouse is a combination of data lake and data warehouse. And the thing is, what you can do with a lakehouse is you can just query the data which is in your data lake. And
slightly correct you there, Frank.
It's done.
Sorry, the Delta Lake, is basically where you get to work with Delta tables, and Delta tables are is a format that was specified some time ago for you to be able to work with Parquet files with ACID, basically, so atomacy, consistency, isolation, and durability. So in other words, the Delta Lake format allows you to work with transaction logs for the benefit of those with a SQL-related background. And a lakehouse is basically a paradigm that you work with, but at the same time, it's also the name of an item you work with in Fabric now. So you can work with a lakehouse item in Fabric, and you access it working in a lakehouse editor. So hopefully we bring a bit of better clarity to what those particular items are.
Maybe only one thing I would like to add here is that what you could do with a lakehouse is you can query the data which is in the data lake in the Delta files. You can query with SQL, and this is pretty cool because there is no real SQL engine underneath, or there's not like an MDB file or something like this. But you can query all of your data in your data lake. You can query with SQL. Okay, one last question, Kevin, and then I think we will move on. Are the DP-700 questions more scenario-based or configuration-specific?
Well, it's a good question. And as we both already know, Frank, from the practice assessments online, it's actually, the reality is a combination of both.
Exactly.
There is one more question as well we need to very quickly answer. Can we connect OneLake straight to an ERP system like SAC or SAP? And the answer, Frank, is it depends.
Exactly.
You can do it from certain SAC and SAP sources. You have to keep an eye on the online documentation. There are updates all the time. But yes, there is a direct connectivity. Well, not direct. You still have to do a bit of work, but you can ingest from certain types of SAP systems. So please go and look at the Fabric documentation. Keep an eye out for updates as far as those are concerned.
If you're not able to connect directly, what's always possible is you have these you have the data flows Gen 2, right? And with data flows Gen 2, you have many connectors to just get the data in. It's like the connectors you know from Power Query in Power BI. Okay, so let's talk about implement and manage analytical solutions in Fabric.
Indeed. So you have the option to be able to load batch data directly into various storage options in Fabric. Like you can see here, you can ingest data directly into a lakehouse, a warehouse, or even a SQL database. So you do have to make a judgment call at times and choose the right option on which one to actually store your data in. And as my esteemed co-presenter mentioned earlier, there are various batch ingestion, data ingestion tools available. Apache Spark. So if you come from a Synapse Spark compute or a Databricks background, you can utilize your notebook's knowledge and actually ingest data using notebooks, for example. Obviously, there may be some network considerations to take in mind there. You can just through SQL Analyst's endpoint, as Frank has gone into a fair bit of detail about, you can work with data flows Gen 2, or for those who have Power BI background, you can work with Power Query. You can work with data pipelines, and as I mentioned earlier, this is the way that you orchestrate data movement into Fabric and into various locations, etc. And I think Frank mentioned this earlier, but I will reiterate, when you orchestrate with data pipelines, you do actually get activities to work, to allow you to work with data flows Gen 2 and notebooks.
Exactly.
And of course, as Frank has talked about as well, shortcuts. And there are some interesting things happening with shortcuts at the moment. But like Frank mentioned, they are basically symbiotic links to data stored elsewhere. So here's the big question we often get asked about, Frank.
Yeah, exactly. When to use what? Yeah, exactly. So we don't want to read the whole slide to you, right? But there are some things you have to consider. You have to consider the data. So there is another thing what you could use as well in the data pipelines. There is a copy activity, and this copy activity is very much optimized on getting data in quick, right? And so depending on also your what you know already, data pipelines copy activity is, for example, a low-code, no-code solution. You can easily click through all of this, and then you have a data ingestion through this data pipeline copy activity. Data flows Gen 2, everyone who knows Power Query, I think, will be very familiar with the data flows Gen 2 interface, and Spark, as already said, is like a Python code which lives in a notebook and which can then use to ingest data. And maybe Spark, as you might know, Spark cluster is originating from big data scenarios. So if you have a really big amount of data, maybe a Spark cluster would be the way to go, because the Spark cluster, there are multiple nodes within the Spark cluster, and your workload can be divided upon this node. Cool thing on all of this is, and this is one interesting thing of Fabric, is that Fabric is a software as a service solution, so you don't have to deal with the Spark cluster at all. The only thing what you could do is you can say how big it should be, and you don't have to set up a Spark cluster or stuff like this, which is a very tedious technical task.
Thanks, Nick. So we've had another question come into the chat. I was actually going to add something else to the slide, but let's answer the question first. How do we back up data in Fabric Lakehouse against disaster? Now, there are a few different approaches you can actually look to do this. Obviously, one option, it will use up a bit of storage though. You can actually, if you've got data coming into your Lakehouse, you can actually replicate that data elsewhere directly yourself in Fabric. Alternatively, you can actually create your own solution to store the data somewhere. And the last option I will mention, there is a highly documented business continuity disaster recovery, so BCDR, solution for Microsoft Fabric available. It is documented online, so everybody, if you type in, if you're interested in this, BCDR, be aware, of course, like a lot of things in the world, there is a cost factor in both, but that's another way you can back it all up.
Yes, now, and I have another question for you, Kevin, and this is about your most favorite topic, is do we require Azure DevOps knowledge to become an Azure Data Engineer? So what's your take on this?
Well, Azure DevOps knowledge, if you're working in a business that uses Azure DevOps and you want to do CI/CD for Microsoft Fabric, the straight answer is yes. Now, not all of Azure DevOps. I'm not saying that you need to go off and study for the AZ-400 exam, etc. But you do need to have a good fundamental knowledge of the Azure repo service and Azure DevOps to work with the Git repositories. If you're looking to perform CI/CD, true CI/CD, then you will need to have knowledge about how to work with Azure pipelines. Yes. So I hope that answers the question for everybody there.
And my take on this is it's always good to have some knowledge on Git, right? Because if you're working in professional IT, it would always be nice to have knowledge about Git, because I think if you only write a single line of code, this single line of code should be in some kind of repository because you might change it in the future.
Yeah. But like I said, you need Azure DevOps knowledge if you're going to do CI/CD, and the reality is you need Azure DevOps knowledge specifically for the Azure repo service. If you're intending to use, even if you're just intending to use Microsoft Fabric Git integration.
Exactly.
So in other words, create that link between your workspace and a branch in a Git repository. So we need to cover next, Frank, about the transformation and orchestration.
Oh yes. So what most of you already know is if we have source systems, the data in the source system is not like the data we should use in analytics, because it might have some errors. There might be data missing and stuff like this. So and there are different kind of things you could use to just transform and orchestrate within Fabric Data Factory. So first of all, data flows Gen 2, we already talked about this, and as you know from Power BI, probably you can use Power Query and data flows Gen 2 just to transform your data as well, right? Pipelines, again, you can orchestrate different steps with pipelines, and maybe one thing we until now didn't mention is what you could do as well is you can schedule this pipeline. So you can say, okay, I have this pipeline, and this pipeline shall run each night at 3 a.m. or something like this, right? Notebooks, code-driven transformations, we already talked about this. So there are different languages which are available in notebooks. One of these languages is Python or PySpark. Then you could use something like Scala, you could use SQL, and you could put in your code to just transform the data. And maybe one more thing on notebooks, which is also interesting, is you can just have your documentation there as well. So notebooks support code and documentation cells, and these documentation cells are in Markdown, so you can have even a really nice documentation. And real-time intelligence, so what you could do here is if you have some streaming data sources, right? Like, for example, an Azure Event Hub or something like this, which is constantly streaming events, then you could use real-time intelligence with event streams. And also there are these event houses which host KQL databases, and these KQL databases are databases, time series databases, which are used for streaming data. And so all of these transformations you do have one lake integration, so they will write back in Delta Packet format, right? And there is also governance, so the orchestration respects the workspace roles and item permissions you give them. Okay.
We have a question in the chat. And
yes.
I don't need an answer straight away, Frank. The question is, will you talk about KQL and how to practice for this as well? And I think we will answer this. Hang on. I think we will answer this in 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Over to you,
okay.
Frank.
So yeah. I will give you a quick overview of real-time intelligence. So real-time intelligence is everything about streaming data. So you have your streaming data sources, which could be things like, for example, Kafka, Event Hub, and so on. And these streaming data sources can stream into an event stream. Event stream is like a low-code, no-code representation of your streaming data. What you could do in an event stream is you can transform your data, like, for example, filtering, maybe aggregating, stuff like this. And then you can send this data to 2 or maybe even 3 different things. So first of all, you can send it to a KQL database within Event House. So KQL is a language that was developed by Microsoft, and you will find it in different other products like Log Analytics and also in Azure Data Explorer. And the question, which was on how to practice this, there is a very nice learning experience for Microsoft out there, which is called the Custo Detective Agency. If you don't know about the Custo Detective Agency, please Google this. And it's really, really cool. It's a really, really cool learning pattern to learn KQL. Okay, so you can just put the data into Event House or in the KQL databases within Event House to store the data. But what you could do as well, if you don't want to store the data, if you just want to act on the data, you can either send them directly to Power BI, or you could send them to the activator. The activator is a thing that can spot patterns in your streaming data and can react on this pattern. So, For example, if there is a certain condition which is met, then it can send an email or it can send a Teams message. Or, and this is the most interesting part of the activator, what it also can do is it can trigger a Power Automate flow, and it can give all the data which is in this data set that triggered the activator can be given to the Power Automate flow. Then you, within the Power Automate flow, you can have your logic, which does something with the data, right? And then we have the KQL query set and the real-time dashboard. So the real-time dashboard is for visualizing your streaming data, and the KQL query set is for storing KQL queries within Fabric. And everything on this is in the real-time hub. So the real-time hub is like a data catalog for all things data streaming. Okay, Kevin, I think we can move to the next slide.
One more point though, Frank.
Yes.
Can you, before I move to the next slide, make sure you tell everybody about the KQL reference guide.
The KQL, yeah, the KQL reference guide is also a very nice thing, and I think we can put the links to this in the chat in YouTube, or we can add it afterwards as a comment to YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, to help answer the question about KQL, there's a Custodial Detective Agency and also the KQL reference guide to help you build up your knowledge on working with the better KQL language as well. And we do have another question, Frank, before we move on.
Yes,
can we
please,
make use of AI? Can I answer this one? Actually, do you want to ask and I answer, or the other way around?
Yeah, feel free. How you would like to do.
Okay, I'll ask and answer myself. So, question is, can we make use of AI in building the pipeline? My manager was talking about this in the meeting, and the answer is, well, there's two different approaches here. If you're working in Fabric and you're lucky enough to have a Copilot enabled capacity, and you've been given the right permissions to use Copilot, then you can actually use Copilot when you're working with data pipelines directly. So you can go into your data pipeline, click on Copilot, and it will help you curate your pipelines how you see fit. Another outside of working with Fabric approach as well is the fact that you can actually do some elements of data pipelines when you're working with the bare JSON files for effectively when you're working with GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio Code. So it can help you there as well. And also as well, whilst I'm on the topic, and again, if you're working in Visual Studio Code and you have fortunate enough to be able to use GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio Code, you can actually then connect up to the Microsoft Learn MCP server and actually use natural language to ask array questions relating to it there as well. Another question we've got in. I was about to change slides. And I'll ask this to you, Frank, and you can answer. Are Fabric data pipelines different from Azure Data Factory pipelines?
Yes, they are different and the same. So the thing is, if you are used to work with Azure Data Factory pipelines, well, you will see many similar things, and it will also from the UI, it will be very similar. There might be some things you probably cannot do with Fabric pipelines, which you can do with Azure Data Factory pipelines. For example, if we're talking about the SSIS integrated runtime, right? This is something which Fabric doesn't support, but this is something which the ADF pipelines support. What you could do is, if you have a scenario where you have some old SSIS packages who are using, and you're using these with integrated runtime, what you could do is you can use this and use Fabric as a data sink. So you can just transform your data and do whatever you would like to do your data, and then just drop it to Fabric, right? But they are different. And the other thing is, one more thing to mention here is that if you're using Azure Data Factory pipelines, you have two different, you have to pay two different things. You have to pay the Fabric capacity, and you have to pay whatever the Azure Data Factory pipeline does, right?
All right. So,
yes.
Hopefully that's answered the question. Like Frank said, that Data Factory is obviously a bit more mature and has more stuff there, but then you end up paying twofold if you're using that to move, ingest and transform data in Fabric. Right, so.
Monitoring. Yeah. So if we're thinking about Fabric, then there are many things we could monitor, right? We can monitor data pipelines because we want to know if the data pipeline was executed successfully or if it failed, right? If it failed, then we have to take some countermeasures on this. For sure, we want to monitor data flows as well for the same reason. So another thing is if we are using semantic models, right? The semantic models have two kinds of data connections. So one data connection is like a live connection to the data, and the other one is a connection, as you all know from Power BI, where you just put in the data into your semantic model. And for sure, if you just import your data into the semantic model, you have to refresh it to have the most accurate data within your semantic model. And you can do this on a schedule as well. And for sure, you would like to monitor this as well. And what you could do, so we were talking about notebooks, Kevin, right? But there is also one other thing you could use within Fabric, which are Spark jobs. These Spark jobs are used, more or less, you can just put in Python code there as well. And the Python code will also be executed on a Spark cluster, but without this nice interface that a notebook has, right? And here again, you would like to know, did my Spark job succeed or did it fail somehow? Same is true for notebooks. What you could do as well, also without the data pipeline, is you can schedule a notebook. So if there is some data ingestion, data transformation logic in your notebook, you could schedule this and it will run maybe each day again at 3 a.m. or something like this and do this data transformation. Then you would like to monitor your lakehouses and for sure your event streams as well, because you want to know what's going on essentially, right, Kevin?
Yeah. And on that note, there, as you can see, there's different ways to do the monitoring as well. So you have to identify what you want to monitor. So when events happen, etc. How you want to collect the room, view the data, how to resolve the issues, optimize the performance, etc. So there are a variety of different ways to do this, depending on what you actually want to monitor. Obviously, the key thing here, and one of the main items that you will use in Fabric, to be honest, for a lot of you, this will probably be your best friend for a while, is the Fabric monitoring hub. So when you do things like run pipelines, notebooks, etc., you can actually find the details about these activities in the Fabric monitoring hub. And personally, I think this is very useful for a lot of people. You can see what is running. And for example, with completed notebooks, you can go in, you can have a look at the live session view. So, well, you can look at the session views of the notebooks. If it's still running, you can see what cell it's actually got up to. If it's completed, you can see what's actually been done. And of course, if there's an error, you can actually go in, drill through and actually see what cell caused the particular error. Because obviously, when you're working, for example, in notebooks, you have multiple cells. And if you just see notebook fails, you may not know which part, if it's been called from a pipeline. So you want to drill in, see what's going on. So we actually have another question come in as well.
Yes.
Whilst we're talking about this, how can we set up end-to-end monitoring and alerting for Microsoft Fabric data pipelines as Spark jobs in a production environment?
Yeah.
So, okay. So if you're doing it just within the Microsoft Fabric with the native Microsoft Fabric resources, like I'm talking about, the Fabric Monitoring Hub will be your best friend. You can also, as Frank mentioned earlier, when you're talking about the alerting, it depends on what level of alerting you want, because you can look to use Activator, you can look to use notifications. If you've set up notifications for your different Fabric capacities, and people will get notified when there's a certain threshold to reach, for example. You can also set up levels of alerts in your workspace settings. And in addition to this, outside the DP-700, but good knowledge for the real world, you can actually look at a additional monitoring solution which complements the Fabric Capacity Metrics app that is actually developed by two of Frank's country people, I should say, called Fuon, which is the Fabric Unified something monitoring solution. So you can also look to use that as well. But in the first instance, natively in Fabric, you can look to use the monitoring hub, as we mentioned.
And maybe I would add one more thing. What you could do as well is within real-time intelligence, you can also subscribe to Fabric events. So if something is not working well, like for example, a pipeline is failing or something like this, you will get an event in real-time intelligence. And what you could do there is you could, for example, trigger an activator, right? So maybe whenever this data pipeline fails, we have this magical notebook, and if we run this magical notebook, it will just repair everything, and then the pipeline can run again. And this is something you can automatically trigger through real-time intelligence and through an event stream, which will then point to an activator.
Yeah. So we had another question come in. Is there a way to integrate the monitoring hub in Power BI? So off the top of my head, not directly. However, what you can do is either work with the data that's been collected by any of the applications and the semantic models and curate your own reports. Or alternatively, you can look at that FuOM solution I mentioned earlier. That comes with a series of preset Power BI reports anyway, and one Power BI report which goes into a lot of depth. This complements the other solutions that you can install via apps in Fabric, like what we're showing you here with the feature usage and adoption, and rather coincidentally, the capacity metrics, I should say, report that comes in Fabric as well. So there you go. I hope that answers that particular question for you.
Yeah. So additional learning, Kevin. So how can we learn more on these interesting topics?
So, I mean, you could go through and learn the entire Learn documentation, but let's be realistic for everybody. We do have one more question come in so far. So just before we go into one of my favorite topics, because I'm Frank's as well, because we're big advocates for Microsoft Learn. Another question is, we currently have Azure Data Factory monitoring for a log monitor. How different skill product wise is ADF Fabric Data Factory to the monitoring hub? Any simplified route to learn? Well, actually, you can select Fabric to use log analytics as well. That's as much as I will go into at this moment in time, but it is an option if you want to do so. You can set those up in the workspace. Anyway, let's go on to additional learning for all of you, because it's a topic me and Frank are very, very passionate about.
Oh, yes.
So, this is where you can find out more about the topics covered today. And this is hopefully where you will all be provided with a lot of links all of a sudden right now. So, okay, there is another question coming, but let me go through these first.
Yeah.
So there is first a DP-700 learning path. So in other words, if you go to the Fabric Data Engineer certification page, you scroll all the way down, you will see recommended learn paths from Microsoft effectively. You can go through all of those different learning paths. They cover all kinds of topics, including working with the Lakehouse, Warehouse, and this thing Frank's heard about, a thing called real-time intelligence. And if I remember correctly, that particular learning path, by the way, folks, is 10 hours long, if I remember right. So
yeah, that's true.
You will suck up a lot of real-time intelligence knowledge there. The Microsoft Learn documentation, and like I said, you can go through piecemeal. I use your search engine of choice. You can use now the Microsoft Learn MCP server for those who want to do it in a more agentic way. Use Ask Learn, etc. Then you have the Fabric Career Hub. And if you go onto there, that will come up with some nice steps on what you can do in order to actually pass the exam and gain the data engineering certification. Also, just go down towards the bottom, additional resources on the Career Hub, some pretty diagrams as well, etc. Now, the next one, the collection created by Microsoft Online. So Microsoft have very kindly put together a curated collection of resources to help you get in the right mindset effectively to do the DP-700 exam to gain a data engineering certification. And then our community resources as well, including the F-File certification podcast. But there are a whole rich load of other resources done by a whole load of other community folks as well. So bear that in mind, like Certa Ace training, etc., etc., etc. So with that being said, we have resources and coming scheduled to talk about, but we also have some questions, Frank. Let's fire through the questions before we finish.
Yes, I can take the question on Azure, right? So a question is, if I didn't use Azure before, is better to learn before using Fabric? Does it make a big difference? Well, these are two completely different kind of things. So the only thing you do in Azure regarding to Fabric is creating a Fabric capacity. Everything else is in Fabric. And the thing is, the idea behind Fabric is that Fabric is like a software as a service solution for data analytics. So maybe if you've never heard about software as a service solution, you can think about your private email address, for example. So you wanted to have an email, right? And what you did is you went to outlook.com and then you registered yourself. And after a very short time, you are able to send emails, and everything is, you don't have to know about the technical things. So you don't have to know about how to set up an email server, how to connect this email server to the internet, stuff like this. You can just log in, send your emails, and that's it. And this, the same is true for Fabric, right? So if you want to build analytical solutions, you can start right away with importing data, with transforming data, and you don't have to know about all of this technical stuff. And this is something, there was another question about ADF. Is ADF going away and be replaced by Fabric? Well, I don't see this at the moment, because these are also two different products. So Fabric, as said, is a software as a service solution, which also has a data factory integrated to, and this data factory is to be used very easily, right? Like a low-code solution. Whereas ADF, the Azure Data Factory, is more like the technical solution for this, right? And yeah, well, but there are other different questions, Kevin.
Yeah. So next point, we saw somebody mentions they saw Azure Data Factory as a tool for data transport and Databricks as analytics. Are people utilizing Azure Data Factory now for analytics? Oh, yes. Short answer, no. So there you go. So what's the best approach to monitor and troubleshoot Microsoft Fabric pipelines and workloads in production? Again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, Monitor Hub in the first instance. If you want more in depth, more verbose details, so you could look to use another offering such as the free Fuon application that you can actually look to install and configure as well in a production grade environment. Next question, Frank, and I'll let you answer this one. How much time needed to study for the DP-700, considering they're from a Power BI background?
That depends very much on how quick you learn and how much time you have on this, right? So I think you cannot give a real answer to this, because we don't know you, obviously. But what would you say? So if you have much time for this to learn, I would say maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Or what would you say?
Me? Well, like you said, it does a lot depend on the person. They say they're a Power BI developer. If you've done any of the Power BI or the DP-600 exams in the past, you may already have some knowledge anyway.
Yeah.
So in particular, for example, if they did the DP-600, they can then complement that knowledge by studying the additional DP-700 material. So it does depend, like Frank says, on your background, your way of learning, what you've learned so far, etc.
Yeah, that's true.
Last question. Do we have an option? Frank, you should know the answer to this one. I will ask it. Do we have an option in Fabric to implement CDC like in Databricks? Oh, do we have the option in Fabric to implement CDC? Frank, give the very short answer.
What we could do is we could use CDC from outside databases, for example, to get data into Fabric, and we could use CDC in combination with real-time intelligence as well, because if you have CDC, then each change on the database can be seen as an event, and then you can stream the event into real-time intelligence. Yes.
So, in other words, yes.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, I think we've gone through the majority of the outstanding questions. Let's quickly wrap this up with all the sections. So resources and upcoming schedule. This is what is happening, like Frank mentioned earlier. This is a really great opportunity for all of you. And hopefully you've already taken those of you that need it, have already taken a picture of this QR code to go off and get the vouchers, etc. This amazing competition is taking place.
Yes.
We've already mentioned about this. Frank's already plugged the fact that he's going to be in Atlanta. I nearly said Las Vegas then. Sorry, everybody. Yeah. So there are quite a few of us associated with this event. And as
Yeah.
you can see, you can get a $200 code, discount code at this moment in time. And as you can see, there's a large amount of sessions there as well. And I do
Yeah.
believe, and it's not actually on this slide, on the side note, that the SQL Con is happening at the same time at the
Exactly.
same location. So,
Exactly.
with that being said, shall we wrap up, Frank, and say thank you there,
Yeah.
everybody, for
Sure.
attending
Yeah.
today's accelerated
Exactly.
session?
Yes.
So,
So thanks everybody. I hope everyone had so much fun as we had, right, Kevin?
yeah.
And yeah, to wrap it up, maybe there are some episodes of the F files out there, right? Probably.
I should hope so, including one relating to the last question about CDC.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks everyone, and I
Yeah.
hope you all enjoy
Thanks.
this.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you all for joining, and thank you to our moderators answering all of your questions in the chat. And here at the Reactor, we're always looking to improve our sessions and our experience. So if you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find the link on the screen or in the chat, and we'll see you in the next one.